Hello, and welcome to another episode of Raise the Bar. I am your podcast host, Troy Haines, former UCLA jumper and coach for too many, sometimes years. I'm here to give you the introduction to Matt McInnes Watson, the Plyo Guy. I have met him and talked with him now. He's on Instagram. He's got close to 64,000 followers. He's working out of South Orange County up around Laguna Beach. He does a fantastic job and has a lot of great information on his site and here on Instagram at McInnes Watson. And then if you follow his plusplyos.com and links that's on there, you can get to lots of other stuff. He's doing a podcast. He's got some plyometric programs. He does a lot of different things. So he's not just a track guy. His stuff goes across all explosive athletic platforms, meaning football, basketball, anything that involves speed, soccer, volleyball, tennis. I'm sure there's all kinds of applications there. And so we're going to get talking with Matt. And before we do that, I just want to remind everybody that we are going to be pushing forward with summer here in Orange County and Los Angeles County. I will be doing jump camps Tuesday through Thursday. Once I get back from vacation, I'm going up to Canada. I'll be back June 20th. So my first week of summer camp will be June 25th through the 27th. And then the next 5 or 6 weeks will continue on just like that, where we go Tuesday through Thursday, a couple hours a day. Those will be located at Redondo High School, Redondo Union, beautiful campus here in Southern California. It looks like a little junior college. It's really pretty, usually nice and cool, even when it's sunny. And so we'll be there 10:30 to 12:30 for the Redondo clinic. And then afterwards, I'll train my private clients that want to come. And we are pushing forward with renewed vigor into the training programs for high jumpers. These are tailor-made programs just for you by myself with the needed assist of Barbara Bachoka, my #1 jumper from Canada. We have created programs for high jumpers, and they are tailor-made to your individual needs, meaning if someone really wants to work on their plyometrics, or they want to work on one-legged strength, or, whatever that is, flexibility, durability, power, mobility, all those kinds of things. We work any and or all of that into your program, and nutrition. So if you're looking into that, then follow our link there at Sky High and Fly Jump Lab. .com, and there's all kinds of information there. I also do video analysis and virtual training, so there's a wealth of things there. We do. I've done several Zoom classes on the basics of high jump, and then also branching into the way more specific. But this information is good from the ground level up, from the young kids up to the elites, up to the masters level. So a lot of information if information is what you lack, and coaching if that is what you lack. And we have coached people from all over the U.S. and all over the world. I have a jumper in India, have done amazing stuff with Mahika from India. They're like 12.5 to 13 hours, totally around the world, basically, and can still get that done live via Instagram, FaceTime. It's amazing. Works very well. And anyway, those are the things that are happening right now. So we're going to get Matt here in the room and start talking here in just a second. So stay tuned for the next episode of Raise the Bar with Matt McInnes Watson, the Plyo Guy.
Hey, Coach, what's going on?
Hey, it's Matt. How you doing, man?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Very good. I
Awesome.
apologize about about Monday. It was yes, it was a day for the for the DMV, unfortunately.
Oh man, things happen. I know how it is. Just
Yep.
gotta kind of be flexible, which is important in both of our businesses. So, um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, it's good to meet you. What's the I was looking through and just talking with the followers of the podcast. There's a few of them out there, and I was saying that I saw you as usual on Instagram, and
Mm,
on my feed, I put all those hashtags, in
yeah,
for explosive anything, speed, power, power lifting, power jumping, power
yeah,
sprinting. What I put in all of those three, and I need all of those in my jumpers, high, long, triple, pole vault, all that stuff. So I
yeah.
know your business is probably hitting across a lot of those fronts. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you're doing there, Matt?
Yeah, so I I'm a coach. I'm still a high jumper at heart as well. I think I'll always kind of hold that to to myself of being a lifelong jumper. And yeah, I started as a track and field coach. It was one of those where the coach of the group wasn't able to continue coaching, so I, as the eldest athlete, became the coach of the group.
Right.
And it was just kind of thrusted upon me to figure out how to coach what was a relatively strong group of jumpers. We had three age group national high jump champions in
Wow.
the group alone. So it was, yeah, and it was a mixture of male and female athletes, as well as multi-eventers, as well as long and triple jumpers. And that really, I think having the multi-events and also the horizontal jumps actually really made me look into a lot more coaching and physical preparation and everything. So that that drove me to need to figure out how to coach speed, how to coach general power, how to
Mhm.
coach the throws as well. And I think if there's anything that I'd ever tell someone is learn how to coach the multi events. It is it's such an interesting kind of puzzle to solve.
Mhm.
And it's something that I think very few people feel like they ever have it completely figured out. So that was that was kind of a segue then into working in strength and conditioning. Worked with basketball teams, worked in soccer in the UK as well, and we I was also teaching as well. I'd finished university, graduated, and so on, did a
Mhm.
master's, and so education has always also been a large component to what I do and what I deliver. And really through the coaching that I got, and then through the mentoring, then from the coach that left or had to leave due to health reasons, I really just went all in on understanding dynamic movement and yeah, and really towards jump training and plyometrics as a system that can be really thrusted upon any athlete that works in speed and power sports.
Right.
So, and we always felt like we had a lot to offer with regards to that sort of training as well. I think a lot of track and field do feel like that as well. We
Mhm.
see a lot of other athletes move and we feel like there's maybe a lot more to give in those kind of athletes that don't compete in the track and field world or haven't done maybe that much track and field training. So yeah, and I think from that I kind of put it to myself and said, right, well, I've got to figure out how these track and field based systems can then be brought into team sports as well. And
Mhm.
so that kind of birthed the idea of Plus Ply as our business. And yeah, now we consult with any sport you can think of. I've worked with ultimate frisbee to figure skating to
Mhm.
American football to track and field to yeah, it honestly to parkour. It's just continually kind of grown and grown and grown. And so
Right.
um and that's also been a very large component of what we've tried to push is how can we do it and how can we benefit every dynamic movement or any dynamic possible. So the system continues to develop and really just take on new challenges. And it's great because it just tests the rigor of the system as well, which I love.
Right. Well, so you were talking about you're over in the UK. Where are you over there?
Well, I was in the UK. I'm now in Southern California.
Well, that's right.
Uh,
We're on the same time frame right now. That's right. It's 8 o'clock in the morning for both of us. Where
it
were
is.
you in the
I,
UK?
I was in Southampton, which is about an hour south of London. So yeah, so worked in and amongst as a jumper and as a coach. You know, worked with athletes that were primarily locally to us, but you know, we would compete all over the UK and so on.
Right. Um, and then you mentioned your education, and you applied your education to your coaching. What kind of degrees do you have over there? Like I over here, I got
Mm,
a degree in kinesiology at UCLA back in '86, and
yeah.
then I got myself a master's in kinesiology, exercise science, at Cal State Long Beach. I think in the 2000s. I don't know. It took a while for me to get to that one. And then, that I've kind of done the same thing. I've applied a lot of those things, but I'm
Mm.
wondering what the equivalent is on your end over there.
Yeah, so it is a little different. So I studied just quite a general sports science degree,
Mhm.
and then did a master's, which was a kind of like a new master's program that they'd launched at my university whilst I was an athlete. Um, and it was called Athletic Development and Peak Performance. It was basically like a six kind of topic based master's degree that really encompassed like physiology, S&C, psychology, tactics, technical. And it was really good actually. It gave us, all the pieces to the puzzle, and I think it pushed for me to, yeah, just develop a bit more of a critical eye. I did actually take on a PhD a few years after that, but I've recently paused that PhD. Sorry, just generally stopped the PhD because of, life getting in the way.
Right. Yeah. You're
But
busy, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah. So it it really just developed a bit more of a critical eye for me in terms of the information that I was looking at, and really within my masters I was starting to question the quality of research in the plyometric field already.
Mm.
I'd been I'd been part of a system that had athletes coming in at quite a young age and that were already doing forms of plyometrics or dynamic movement that the research field and the S&C community at the time were kind of, standing back and saying, oh, you shouldn't be doing it with X population of athlete because of these these issues that could arise. And I was like, well, it's kind of worked out anecdotally for all of the athletes that have come through this training group.
Right.
And I'd been part of that training group for a number of years. Athletes come and go, they move from sport to sport. But athletes would come in and they would learn to do plyometrics through the system that I had been through, and they came out the other side looking like more of an athlete.
Right.
That was as simple as I observed it back then, and I was like, I'm not sure the research fits that. There's a lot
Yeah.
of mongering around it. There is a lot of movements that actually aren't plyometric that are being claimed to be plyometric. So it just developed that
Yeah.
lens and that critical eye, which I think has really helped me from then onwards, sort of thing.
See, this is where my brain starts just firing all kinds of questions because I have a lot of the same, observations inside. Not really, I'm a terrible researcher. I mean, I know where the libraries are, I know where to find the stuff. And it's like I'm busy coaching. So it's like I don't usually stop and go, wait, what is this? There's a lot of things you find out that work practically. They work, so you put them to work. And the first thing popped in my mind is that I have never actually even looked up the definition of plyometrics. Like when
I was a senior at UCLA in 1986, a long time ago. It's almost 40 years. They had just introduced plyometrics, not as, I'm sure they were around, but this is at UCLA now, which is one of the top universities in the country, especially in the 80s, back with heyday of UCLA football, winning Rose Bowls, and basketball was good. Reggie Miller and those guys, and Troy
Yeah.
Aikman went through there, and lots of money and lots of research, and you got your athletes to experiment on, in the gyms and everything. But I remember when plyometrics, quote unquote, came out, we were in the gym and they're like, oh yeah, here are these boxes, and when you're a jumper, you just like jumping. So it's like, oh, you jump from here up on the box. Cool, I can do that. And you jump up on the box and you say, okay, well, you should drop down first and then jump back up. Like, okay, I can do that. So it's just kind of fun. It's like being a kid, jumping in the sandbox or something. So, but at the same time, I realized as we were talking that I've never truly looked up the definition of plyometrics. So like you said, I think there's a lot of things that can come in and out of the umbrella. So from a technical and a practical standpoint, what are plyometrics for those listeners that might not be clear on what that is?
Yeah. It's a good question. And I think that coaches dislike me when like I'll do a seminar or a workshop and I'll be like, this is what a plyometric is, and they're kind of like rolling their eyes, and I'm like, but also there's a lot of great coaches that might not necessarily see it in the same way, and the reasoning behind how I determine a plyometric makes a lot of sense and fits along with a lot of the research and the anecdotal stuff. So a plyometric to me is a landing and takeoff based action. So you have to come in with falling height, with traveling displacement, whatever you want to call it. You then have to hit the ground and then you take off. And you probably want to do that in a pretty fast manner. So to us in the track and field community, there's a lot of those collisions, right? There's a lot of those hits on the ground and then takeoff based actions. And really it comes down to the distinction between that and just doing, let's say, a vertical counter movement jump on the spot is what happens at the tendon and how much the tendon then provides energy to the takeoff.
Right.
And when you land, it produces a highly stimulating shock to the muscle, and the muscle says, come on, Mr. Tendon, help me out here and produce some explosive energy. Without the landing, okay, you can drop and then drive out of it. And of course, we do get that like stretch shortening action to it, which is great, but it's still nothing in comparison to what we can do when we're stiff on the ground and we have that stimulating landing based action. Now, obviously, you can do landing and takeoff based actions that are a little bit slower. The slower you do them, the more, again, you lay off the tendon and you use more muscular based action. The faster obviously, there is a sweet spot. You don't want to spend too little on the ground. You still do have to get that pull on the tendon, and that will require like a certain amount of time. It'd be like a high jump takeoff where it's like snatched at the ground and you're like, well, you're not really not spending enough time on the ground to really get that stimulation to actually go vertically. You just bail through the takeoff. So there has to be a sweet spot, but that sweet spot is still pretty fast.
Yeah.
You're still looking at movements just over 1/10 of a second up until, I often say, just over 2/10 of a second.
Right.
Anything that creeps towards 0.3 of a second, it's becoming less and less plyometric because of the stimulation on the tendon.
Right. So we're looking for speed of the movement across the board and loading, right? So
exactly.
If I'm moving fast, say in a long jump, I'm sprinting all the way down the runway, and then I hit the takeoff and go. I'm probably gonna get under your number. If I'm running full speed, I'm probably not going to spend 0.3 or 0.4 seconds on the ground unless I take an inordinately long last step, which is what a lot of jumpers have had that realization, high, long, and triple, earlier in their career when they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to really reach out here and power and take that long last step, and you just get stuck. on the ground, right? Nothing comes out. And you're like, "God, I put everything into that. And I got like a 12-foot jump and I was expecting like an 18-foot jump." You're like, yeah, well, you're too long on the ground. Um,
Yeah.
so if I'm hearing that right, and I know this is the case, like as far as preparation goes, if you're preparing someone, the reason I'm bringing this up is I get kids thrown at me every time of the year, this time of year, at
Mm.
the end of the year as they're getting ready for generally Junior Olympics. My high school kids are done, state meets over, and a lot of them go back to their other sports. And we're right here at the start of the summer. So they're getting out of school and they're going on vacation. So they just disappear. All my jumpers are like, "Coach, it was a great season. See you later." And I've gotten used to that. I'm like, "Bye." I get a chance to detox. They get a chance to detox. And then if, they're coming back to high school next year, then I'll start to hear from them. And sometimes still not even through the fall, but that's a whole nother story. But the ones that are continuing on are either high level, elite athletes. I've had some Paralympians. I've had some hopeful Olympians, and they're the ones that are keep pushing on. And then there's the Junior Olympics crowd, which here in Los Angeles is very poorly organized in that most people, if I say, "Hey, are you thinking about doing the Junior Olympics?" They're like, yeah, sure. How do I do that?" And I'm like, "I'm not really sure. I know they exist." And then I got to go start digging, and you're just like looking through these websites, and that's not clear, but that's a whole nother issue. So, but they want to continue on. And I had this lady bring me her son, CJ, from Las Vegas. Great kid, he's super smart. He's only like 10 or 11, and he's already understanding physics concepts. I'm saying, "Hey, I'm talking about force and power," and he starts throwing these things at me. I'm blown away by him. I'm like, "This is awesome." So we spend about 5-10 minutes doing his warm-up skips, A drill, B skip, C skip. We're going through, and I say, "Hey, what's that one?" He goes, "Oh, that's what we call this in this track club I'm doing." Like, "Oh, I've never seen that one before. That's cool. Let me see how you do that." So we're going back and forth. And then we get to the jumping, and we say, "Okay, I put the bar low." He takes like 5 jumps, and all of a sudden he's saying, "Mom, my knee hurts." And I'm just like, I go, "Oh yeah, well, it's been a long season, right? We're getting to that wear and tear point." And I started talking with the mom. She said, "Yeah, his coaches are always having him do it." And she starts telling me these workouts that these kids are doing. And I'm like, "Oh my God, they're totally over voluming these kids."
Yeah.
And the thing that I'm running into a lot is, how do I get, the power stuff, you and I both know it works. So it's
Yeah.
like I can get them faster, more explosive, all these other things. But a lot of times I find that these kids, you get someone, and let's just call them a contemporary of yours doing
Yeah.
what you do. And they sell this power program to this team, and they come out and they go, "Here we go. We're just going to go." And they run all the kids. Let's say they got a 20-kid soccer team, and they just start running this stuff at them. And some of the kids just start breaking. I mean, literally, they're for whatever reason, the program design,
Mm.
the length of their season already, whatever other stuff that they're doing, blah, blah, blah. So I've started working with I'll say young man, Dr. Tommy out here. And Dr. Tommy does a lot. He's a PT guy. And, I get these kids that are technically broken. I go, "Look, I can't push this kid because he immediately starts complaining about pain." I shut him down. I say, "Hey, you need to ice, you need to do this, you need to do that, and you need to go see Dr. Tommy," because Dr. Tommy's training pyramid ends up in power where you and I live, but
Mm.
his bases of mobility, stability, flexibility, all those other things, the very bottom of his pyramid is normal. And I give him kids that are a step below on that pyramid that he just labels broken. He's like, "I got to get them from broken to normal so that we can start up this pyramid." But power is way at the top of that pyramid. It doesn't exist down at the bottom where, broken and normal are. So
Yeah.
my question is, I know it's a long
Mm.
lead in there, but how do you train them to where they're ready for power without breaking them? Like you're talking about the
Yeah.
lower level intensity stuff.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
assuming that exists as at the bottom of your training before you get them to this
Yeah.
high level stuff.
Yeah. So we have um four tiers or amplitudes of movement for our system. We have at the top we've got intense stuff. We call it ping. It's because it
Yeah.
resonates quite well with young athletes to ping off the ground.
Right.
That's, that is the top of the pyramid. Then we have sub-maximal, or we call it our medium tier. So it's like you're still moving at quite a good speed, but it would be like relatively fast tempo running. That
Mhm.
sort of, imagine you were bounding at that kind of same sort of
Yeah.
intensity. Then we have real rudimentary based landings, which we class as light tier, where it is very easy with regards to intensity, but it's very light on your feet. So we're still trying to get off the floor quite quickly.
But
But you
maybe
could,
not as high, right? Not
but
like
not as high,
3 feet in
exactly.
the air or something. Yeah.
No, nowhere near that. You're probably more like, you know, 4 to 10 inches off the ground maximum.
Yeah.
Um, and then to the side of that, which is kind of not plyometric, we have our deep tier, which is just deep range of motion, landing and takeoff base actions, which aren't per se plyometric because the speed element's not there.
Right.
So where young athletes live for me is the light and the deep stuff.
Hmm.
The kids lack flexibility, they lack the control, especially with their torso. They've got
Right.
these newly formed limbs that continue to move away from them in terms of
Right.
knowing where they are in space. So the deeper range stuff is fantastic for that. And I think it does build just a lot of tissue integrity for the joints. So knees, hips, ankles, they're really
Hmm.
just being taken through much deeper ranges of motion, something that they don't necessarily get in track and field, where everything is tall and stiff and hard and fast.
Yeah.
But then we do the light stuff, which again is somewhere that we can use a high volume, but the intensity is low enough, it doesn't destroy what they're trying to do elsewhere.
Right.
That's
Right.
where people, I think, find it really hard to program. It's like, well, we want to put plyometrics in, but we're also doing jump training. So it's like we've got these two elements that are both really high in intensity, and we're doing
Right.
really high volumes of both.
Right.
And I'm like, well, if you're doing a high volume of high jumping, then this plyometric stuff cannot be high. There's
Right.
just no way. You have to drop down to the lower intensities and work on the capacity of the ankle,
Hmm.
understanding where you are proprioceptively. That's a big thing. These kids go through like their fastest growing spurts, between 10 to let's say 16. And at a certain stage in there, they're going to lose all their proprioception.
Right.
You'll often see it like you won't see a kid for 3 or 4 months and they come back and they're 3 or 4 inches taller. And you're like, oh, you're now like Bambi trying to move around.
Right. Right.
You go through these periods. So I use the light stuff to relearn how to land again, understand, what's it like to have my foot just slightly out of the wrong, it's splayed out 5 degrees. Can I
Right.
handle, or is my knee like, oh,
Yeah.
that's going to hurt me. So I use tons of different variations in the light movement. So we're doing 2 foot, split 2 foot. We move forwards, backwards, sideways. We use one leg, we bound, we hop. And really, I just give them so many variations. I'll put in like 3 or 4 staple movements that they'll do a couple of sets of. But then I'm like, right, well, you now could be creative. I want you to come up with a pattern that the rest of the group can do. And it really is just about variability of movement. So
Hmm.
that's how I'll use things for younger groups of athletes. And then once you see that they're all starting to get all the different movement patterns down and you're like, oh, this looks really easy on you guys. You look like you're able to just mop up that volume. Then I can think about taking it into like the sub-maximal stuff.
Hmm.
And you handle the sub-maximal stuff and the high intense high jumping or triple or long jumping.
Right.
And that tends to be how I attack it. To start real rudimentary and then gradually see if I can tease in little bits of more intense work.
Right. Yeah. That's the one thing that I've found over the years that, makes the most sense to me is I always tell, the parents, because they got to get the watered down version, most of them, unless they were athletes themselves, or, they've got a degree in biomechanics or something where you go, hey, um, you know, whatever you have going on with this club that they're doing too much volume. Volume is the key. Like you said, if you're going to go high volume, you've got to go lower intensity. You can't match high volume and high intensity, like you said, because the shock is great. Yeah, you're shocking the system. And if you do a day that's high volume, high intensity, okay, maybe. But what are you going to do the next day? You can't come back and keep hammering those systems. I tell them, I go, look, your kids are amazing. They get up and they run around like crazy and they do thousands of reps and they come home and they eat and they go to sleep. And I'm like, now this is where the adventure begins, because they have to sleep and they have to sleep well. You have to feed them a lot of protein because they're destroying their bodies. And people don't understand that. Your body is actually getting beaten up and it needs to recover and it needs to rebuild and come back stronger so that you do see those explosive reactions that we're talking about. You're building neuromuscular pathways, you're building patterns of movement, you're building strength and speed and all these things. And it doesn't happen like that. It'd be nice, but it doesn't happen like that. And if you don't give it a chance to happen, then you start, I say it's like those fighting games, where you see the character has a power bar at the bottom. Yeah. And when their power gets low, all of a sudden the guy just throws a jab and they go down because they don't have anything to fight it with. And then, they get back up, but then their power bar starts to fill back up, but it only comes back halfway. I go, that to me is the perfect picture of how somebody's training, because the power bar fills up halfway and then you keep fighting. You go right back to fighting and you go draining that power bar again. And I go, that's what you guys are doing to your kids when you're sending them to these camps or whatever, and they do 4 days in a row of nothing but power, and you're like, oh my gosh, you're just asking for trouble,
and you don't regulate. Let's say that they do a big track session on a Monday, and then let's say it's the summer break and they then go out and play 3 hours of pickup basketball with their friends. They don't auto-regulate that fun,
right?
And then they come back Tuesday and they're like, Mom, my knees are killing me. And it's like, it's because again, so like, us coaches have to program for that sort of consideration. Like, these are kids, they will also go out and just play with their friends.
Right.
If they're sporty, they're gonna go and play sports. So it's, like you say, to go back to, like, you've been playing pickup basketball and now you're going to go to the track again and do more. Like, you really have to consider these sort of things. So it's like, if the volume's high, then the intensity is almost super low. And if the intensity is high, then the volume has to be super, like it really has to swing for a super young athlete. You're dealing with 18, 19, 20-year-olds, it becomes a whole different story, I think. But it's tough.
It's and it comes in, like you're talking about, experience. You have practical experience in the fact that you were an athlete and a coach. You still are, and you also have your training behind you and your years of experience. Those kind of add up. Another question I have, and I don't want to have you feel like you're getting grilled, but I just
no.
I get experts in their field. I get excited because I'm like, anything that you say to me that like resonates with what I've already done, or things that slap me around a little bit and say, hey, you could do a little bit more of this. I'm ready to put it to work. So I keep thinking, one of my jumpers, Barbara Pachoka from Canada, and when she came down here, I introduced her. She had skipped rope before, but I really liked skipping rope. When I got to UCLA, there were, a lot of ropes in the weight room, and there was nobody sitting there saying, hey, you need to skip rope. But it was like, you'd see a couple people skip rope, wow, they look pretty good. And I was always like, when I was a kid, I loved boxing. I loved watching the American boxers, Sugar Ray Leonard and Muhammad Ali and, these guys, and you'd see film of them skipping rope and you'd be blown away. I mean, so fast, so intricate with their movements, crossovers and doubles and repeats, and just the rope's a blur, and I'm just like, that has to be great for you. I mean, I didn't, at that point, I didn't even know why, but I'm like, I know that's not easy. Anybody that makes anything look easy, I tell kids over and over, I go, if you see somebody who's mastered something and they make it look like effortless, I go, you have no idea how much time went into them achieving that level. So, we started skipping rope. She said, why do you like skipping rope so much? I said, well, I think it creates coordination patterns. It's these neuromuscular things. You've got to time up your hands and your feet. You've got to have good balance. You have to be able to get at least a quarter of an inch off the ground to get the rope under there, and all that stuff. So I said, and you can treat it as a warm up for your plyos. I go, if you're jumping rope, like you said, you've got a tiny bit of up and down, and of course right there I get a beginner and I say, okay, let me see what you got. And some kids will blow you away. You're like, oh, you've done this before. And other kids, they start taking those 2-foot high hops, right, to get the rope to go under once. And after they do like 10 reps, I go, okay, that's good. I go, you just did a whole a set of plyos right there because you're 2 feet
Yeah.
off the ground. You're going up and you're coming down landing, right? So I started thinking about the whole, what do we want to call it? The spectrum, or the, the whole thing from the low to high, like you're talking about. And inside of both running, jumping, skipping rope, whatever it is, like you're talking about, there's the intensity level is the thing that I find of interest. And I go, watch people warm up. So watch these athletes. So if you watch Steph Curry, I guarantee you Steph Curry doesn't come walking out onto the basketball court and start shooting 45 footers. It doesn't work that way. You
No.
got to, you watch in high school, they do layup lines. You dribble up, you do a nice little easy layup. The other guy comes over, gets the rebound, pass to the next guy, and you're watching that go for a little bit, and then guys all of a sudden, after about 5 minutes, sometimes less, all of a sudden they start pulling up and taking 10 footers, shooting a bank shot, they're doing whatever. Some guys start dunking, you're like, okay, but they started out slow and then they started picking up, right? And I always think that should be the general pattern on just about anything. Like, you don't just want to go out there and start, I'm 60 years old now, so I don't go out and do anything quickly right away. I got to do my 2-lap jog, and I got to do some easy mobilities and this and that. And then I'm like, okay, I can start moving around a little bit now, but you don't just come out. We're not wired like cats, right? The cats are either walking really slow or they go, like, wow, they're really quick, but they're like 90% fast twitch.
Yeah.
So I guess, again, a long lead in, but how the question that I had in the back of my mind was, how plyometric are movements like jumping rope and sprinting, for instance? Like I tell the kids all the time, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I've been saying it for a long time. I said sprinting to me is very plyometric, because you push super hard and explosively off one foot, and you're basically sprinting is just bounding from foot to foot. Now, sometimes you see a guy like a Derek Druin or Sotomayor when they were at their best. Or some of the guys that have those approaches where they run up and then they start like power bounding, where they're like, like boom, and then boom, and then boom. But once they get on the curve, they go and then they run. I'm like, it's different, but it's similar in that. Like I've designed these workouts for the kids. I call them hashes, right? So I use the hash marks on the football field, and I'll put cones on the hashes, right? So they're yard apart. And I go, I want you to hit everyone like that. And I go, if I want them to go quicker, I'll put a cone halfway in between. And go, okay, I want your right foot on the line. I want your left foot on the green stuff. Right foot on the line, left foot on the green stuff. I go, these are 1/2 yard steps. They're like 1.5 feet. They're quick. So you've got, the shorter the cones are together, the quicker they got to move. But I also take them through that slowly. So anyway, the long lead in, but am I barking up the right tree there? Is that plyometric
I think
essence?
I think like you said, like skipping rope and finding the fluidity and rhythm of that. It's like it's the same as the speed bags, the small ball that rocks backwards and forwards. It's all that rhythm of skill, it's the timing and stuff. And I think that skipping is like a really, really low level of intensity of plyos. Like you can do a seriously high volume of it, because you'll see guys that will skip for 20 minutes, 30 minutes and stuff. And it very much is that. It's stood in a nice tall position, and it's that rhythm of off and on and off and on, of relaxing, contracting. And you don't have to, there's no force through the ground in doing so, but you're also timing that sequence with your arms as well, which is all jumping. So I see sprinting 100% as a plyometric action, as a landing and takeoff based action. You watch world-class sprinters, look at the length of their stride, and it's probably the same bound length as a 15-year-old male high jumper. So it is definitely, you can see we know the levels of forces in world-class sprinting at max velocity. We know that it's like 6 times body weight in that landing. That's significantly high. That's plyometric for me. Like you say, it's all that spectrum. It's like, where does it sit? Maybe sprinting is like 3/4 of the way to a triple jump hop landing, which you could say is top of the pyramid.
Yeah.
Jumping rope is all the way down the other end of the spectrum.
Right.
You know, and you know that you can do far more volume of jump rope than you can do of triple jump hop landing. You can do
Right.
quite a bit of sprint volume. And I think obviously it's very dependent on the frequency of a sprint stride obviously reduces the length of the stride, so you can do more of it. And it would be
Right.
the same, like you could do more speed bounds than you could do bounds for distance. So again, it just situates that along certain parts of
Right.
the spectrum there. So yeah, wholeheartedly for me is definitely plyometric. Both of those actions are.
Okay. And then you're talking about the deep movements. Let's say, like I told this for a long time. So I think I knew it, but I I must have read it somewhere. But I'm like, okay, for instance, a standing box jump is not plyometric, and you'll hear this, like I'm sure you've told those coaches, and they have them to roll their eyes at you, and you're like, but it's still an important move. You know, I need, you know, explosively jumping up onto a box is one thing, but standing there is different. So, you know, then you've got one of the first, I think the first podcast I did on this show like 3 years ago, young man Aaron Washa. His site is Wash On, Wash Off, which I like because it's Karate Kid. But he goes, he did a 71-inch box jump, and but he's running in fast, and you see the gather, the, you know, the 1 foot, other foot, arms way back, you know, boom, hands up overhead, and he's fully extended, and then he's got to get his landing gear up. You know, I'm like, and I was blown away by it because I'm like, I'm pretty sure we did everything in 12s. So I remember doing either I know I did 48-inch box jumps at UCLA my senior year. And I'm thinking I probably at least did a 60. I'm pretty sure because I had some pretty good pop. You know, I remember being able to do the running, you know, vertec and touching 42 off one leg, you know, and off two legs was at least 38 or 40, you know, or something like that. It was silly. But I'm like, I should have been able to do that, but I was still blown away by Aaron because I'm like 72. I don't think I ever thought about doing a box jump onto 62 inches or 6 feet almost in height. So I knew it had to be very plyometric from when it's done that way. So, but then, like you said, if they're just standing, they jump up onto a box and catch. I'm like, those are good. Teach them how to use their arms, you know, drive your arms up, get the timing and all that. But then when you drop from a box down to the ground and then back, that's highly plyometric, like you say, because you're involving that catch, right? And then even before that, now help me with this, because I'm pretty sure if I do the drop and catch without exploding out of it, is that not plyometric? Is it kind of a precursor?
It's a kind of, it's an in-between ground, I think. Some people will claim it's plyometric, some people won't. I just try to keep it simple for people and just say it's not a plyometric, but it has value in what it potentially can do. Like I think that teaching someone to stabilize and to really stiffen from a high fall, there is value in that.
Right.
But I do think that it won't necessarily always cross over really well to then doing a full landing and takeoff, because I think it teaches people to freeze up a little, like a bit too much in comparison. Like when you want to take off and you want to leave the ground in a plyometric, the only thing you're thinking about is taking off. But when you think about a landing and just landing, you are having to completely stop your momentum. And I think that people really, you know, they hold high levels of tension that you'd not want to see in the full plyometric sequence. So I might use them for pretty experienced athletes that can already do the full sequence of actions.
Right.
And yeah, I think that you can just teach stability in other ways as well. But when you want to put like the cherry on top and you're really looking for the top of the pyramid sort of intensities, I think those sort of things is where you can go for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I tend to not use them with beginners because they already carry a lot of tension anyway. Some beginners, like they're freezing up, their arms are really tight and they're clenching their fists, they're clenching their jaw.
Right.
see someone that just can't handle that, and they're like they have too much inhibition in them.
Right.
They freeze up and like, oh, I don't want to touch the ground, or it's like dipping your toe into the water, sort of like, oh, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So that tends to be how I look at it. But I don't think that it's neither one way or the other. I think that
Yeah.
it does shock the system in a similar way, but obviously you're not then using the takeoff and the propulsion
Right.
as a component for that training method. So yeah, there's some funny thoughts around it. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer.
Yeah.
I just try to keep it simple.
Right.
Land, takeoff, plyometric. If it doesn't have both of them, not plyometric.
Right.
But
But
not
still
to
could
say
have
that it's
value.
not
Yeah.
right.
Or even being in between or a growth step on the way to the higher
Sure.
plyometric, right? Yeah. Um, when you're talking about these deeper movements and stabilizations and all that, can
Mm,
that be both? Are we including lifting in there and maybe even walking through some drills? Like I'm teaching the same things that you are. So I'm dealing with people and I say, look, for what we're doing here, this is a complex movement pattern. So I
mm,
go, to me, it makes sense to see it. That's a visualization. If I watch somebody do something, I'm kind of visualizing. Now, to me, a visualization is if you either have to close your eyes and visualize something or whatever. But sometimes I think that's a harsh definition because I'm not even sure how that works in my own head. Like if I go, I'm going to visualize me running up and jumping, does a does the video pop up and actually do
yeah.
that or
But
whatever? And
or
so
if you've never seen it, how can you visualize it? That's also a great thing, right?
yeah, so there's those two levels, but then it's like I'm realizing when I visualize, I don't see a little tape of me running and doing my best technique on a certain jump, but I kind of yeah, I kind of get that. And then I'm like, to me, if I'm going to visualize, and I've stolen this from other great athletes like Dwight Stones. He was one of the first guys that started championing both visualizing and then, I remember the announcers watching Dwight when he'd be standing there going like boom, 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 with his takeoff arm going up and he'd be
Yeah.
leaning back and they're like, what is he doing? Or he'd be standing there going with his head going boom, 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 boom. And I'm
Oh
like
yeah.
going, oh, well, he's doing his curve. And he, even though I'm not really sure, but I'm pretty sure just by the way he's leaning his head and everything, I was like, he's running his
Yeah.
curve and he's counting his steps and he's boom, and he's like, okay, I get that. It makes sense. You program it in. And I tell the kids, I go, look, visualize it as best you can, walk it. Walking it through to me is that easier precursor of just going full speed. Because when they go full speed, like you said, in their little Bambis, things start flying out of place. And you're like, no, 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 I want it like this. So do a perfect walkthrough, and then let's speed up the walkthrough to where eventually we get to a run through, and then eventually we might get to a run through and a jump. I see this kind of the same thing we were talking about before, the sliding scale of intensity and also the levels kind of learning. And I love watching the ones that I train that take me seriously or they apply because I'll catch them doing their visualization before they go. I said just visualize it once or twice maybe, and then when you've said to your body, I want you to do this, then go immediately. Because I think if you let too much time lapse, your body's gonna get confused and go, okay, we did that.
Hmm.
Okay, but what are we doing now? And you just look around for a second. But it's like, okay, practice, practice, go, and cut loose. So when you're teaching, do you find how does that work with you guys? Do you do any visualization work with your kids? Do they
I
do
mean,
walkthroughs and that?
working with high jump, absolutely. I mean, similar to, I think that there is still value in it in the long and triple, but the high jump, because it is so much more complex with, you're not just running flat out, you have to find rhythm. And I
Yes.
think that's one of the hardest elements. I was always jealous of a guy that just did like a 7 stride, stand on the spot and just run. Like
Yeah.
I always wanted that, but I just couldn't jump well off of it. So I
Right.
was more of a find the rhythm and now I can attack in certain ways and stuff. So high jump, definitely. And I also believe as well that I would love for someone to, have like a brain imaging happen whilst they go through that sequence in their head, because I can guarantee you that all of these things are sparking off in their head exactly the same way that if they were actually jumping. So
Mhm.
like that, someone that's good at it as well. You see sometimes I've seen some of my athletes correct the way that they have just like imagined it or
Mhm.
visualized it. They'll go through it and they'll be like, oh no, hang on, that wasn't smooth how I wanted it to be.
Right. Right.
So it's exactly the same for me. It is, I'll see them, they'll rotate, they'll lean, they'll visualize how, or get some of those sensations as to how they'll feel on the curve. And I think I'll still use the term visualization, but actually it's more sensationalizing things for me as well.
Mhm.
Like I think when you walk it, you you'll put your foot down and you'll plant it how you want that feeling to be under your foot. If
Yeah.
it's like too up on the toe, then you're like, oh, it's not as stable as I want it to be.
Right.
And then I want to put my takeoff foot down in this way. And I think that there's definitely a lot to that. And I'm a believer in it. Some people don't necessarily want to walk through it. They'll just want to see it. And then, like you say, okay, go. Some people want to feel it. It's just very, very individualized to the
Yeah.
person working with. But I was 100%, I had to feel that myself.
Yeah.
Um, so I continued to coach it.
And then this is breaching a whole new topic. When we're talking about the deep movements and everything else, I'm assuming both from walkthroughs and all that.
Mm,
And then like when I start working with the younger kids and, all the research still, I think says you don't want to lift heavy weights with them while they're still developing. So when
mm,
they're younger than 14 and you're
yeah,
doing high repetitions, even squats and this and that, you can close the growth plates and, kind of stunt their growth. Even if they are getting stronger and doing whatever, they're just not going to be as tall as they would have been.
mm,
So you got to be real careful with that kind of stuff. But once you can get them in the weight room, I like to get them going. This is just an idea, so correct me if I'm wrong. But what I'd always been doing with my kids was like full squats. Let's go full squats, very light, but and even just body weight. Let's go as far down as you can on two legs, and then come all the way back up. Teach them that technique. Like I'm saying, it's deep. It's going to stress the ankles and the knees and everything else all the way down, all the way back up. Okay, great. And then as they start getting stronger and that's too easy, then we start adding the weight. And if they can still go all the way down, all the way back up, fine. But maybe they can't go all the way down. And then we go, okay, well, let's go half, right? So we're going to go fulls, halves, quarters. And then my mind says I should do jump squats at the end, as a progression on a string. How does that sound? Am I?
yeah. So with actually how I look at it as well with someone that I won't necessarily weight train straight away is that we'll use like deep jumping actions as that first precursor to getting into the weight room. So we can use velocity as the form of overload instead
Hmm.
of like the external overload of a weight on your back.
Right,
So
right,
it's almost like a repetitive like squat jump without weight. So and we can start it in a real small action. We can sit down at the bottom of it and we can just bounce in there. But then I
right,
can get someone to develop how they can drop in and out of it from a full takeoff and landing. And we can stress those joints in those deeper ranges, but just with the speed element. And
right.
we'll do split stance versions of it where we're doing like a split jump, a split squat jump, and then split exchanging. People call them like a lunge jump. And I'll
Yes,
get them to go into those deep ranges and I can do a relatively high volume of it. And it isn't fatiguing neuromuscularly like doing repeated hops or something like that,
right.
where it's like lower leg fatigue is just through the roof.
Yeah.
And the stimulation on like the ankle and the knee is just so high. Whereas I can relax a little bit into deeper ranges of motion in these jumping actions. And then I can get to a stage where I then go into the weight room at an older age and deep squatting is really easy for me. Like the jump stuff improves mobility at those deep end ranges
Hmm.
because it very much doesn't, it's not, the wrong word is to force someone into it, but it kind of does just, you just drop into that action. You're
Hmm.
not trying to like overcome the force. That's the big phrase there in that. When I'm weight training, I put a bar on my back, and the whole time I'm overcoming this force on my back. Whereas when I jump and fall into those ranges, I'm like yielding the force. So I'm
Hmm.
controlling it down rather than having to fight the force as I'm
Right.
dropping down to it.
Right.
So when they get to, let's say, a back squat, they're like, oh, I can handle this, and I can more so yield into that deep position rather than like you see someone that's like they can't get past, let's say, a half squat
Right.
because they're just overcoming it and being like, I don't want to get any deeper, I don't want to get any deeper, so they just straight away come out of it. So that tends to be how I'll go about it. I'll use the deep tier or deep jumps to then segue into a lot more weightlifting later on.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. And it, again, it depends, like you're saying too, there's a lot of variables. I think a lot of
Sure.
people don't think through that from the practical standpoint of experience, like you're saying, experience and age, which are not necessarily the same thing. But,
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
have some highly experienced athletes come to you at 6 years old. And you're like, well, why? Because they've done a lot of stuff. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Especially those little gymnasts, those
Yeah.
holy
Yeah.
mackerel. Um,
But
I,
yeah, I mean, you could get a like I was 6'3" at 15, and I'm still 6'3" now.
mhm.
I had friends that were at 15 were 5'8",
Yeah.
but then 6'3". So it also completely depends on when people are growing as well, like what ages.
Yeah.
I've had some male athletes that have grown at the age of 19, and
Yes.
it's wow. So again, it's a hard one to solve because you're doing all these different things for all these different athletes. But I mean, when I first was coaching the jumps and my training group, I had a lot of athletes that didn't even touch a weight until they were 18, 19. So,
Yeah.
and they were just fine.
Yeah.
They were fine. So I think if you have ways to train them dynamically, so like I use the deep tier stuff as their strength training. That
Right.
became their strength work. And then we got to a stage where we brought in strength stuff.
Yeah.
And like I looked at it, they kept jumping personal bests. They kept jumping higher and further and throwing
Yeah.
better and running faster. I didn't bother messing with it until I'm like, they were questioning, oh, are we going to do some strength work and then next season? And I'm like, okay, cool. Maybe you're ready for it. But up until that point,
Yeah.
I was happy to continue doing what we were doing. So
Yeah, that's interesting too, because I played football in high school, and at 6'3", 170, or so I was really skinny early, obviously as a high jumper. So I
yeah,
remember, I think my sophomore year I'd shot up to like 6'2", and I might have been 140 pounds at 6'2". And then junior year I was still growing a little bit. I put on a little bit of muscle. I think I got up to like 170, and by my senior year I was 6'3", creeping up towards my 6'3.5" that I finished at in about 180, which I still, to me, I thought skinny. My least favorite thing, I don't know if I've ever said this on this show before, but I've had, people would always say, "Oh, you're skinny. You look like a high jumper." And I hated the word skinny, because to me, skinny was always meant weak. And I'm
yeah,
like, oh, weak, like when we were benching for football, I was like, not a big bragging thing, but I benched like 240, I think, which was, at 180 was like what, 180 plus 90 would have been 270. So I was like, it wasn't like at 150% of my weight, but it wasn't, I wasn't struggling to lift my own body weight. Right. And then I think my squats might have been about the same, because we didn't really push the squats that hard. This is 1982, my senior year playing football. So our weight room was terrible, by the way, at my high school, but we worked when we can. A lot of us bought weights for home. That's how bad our gym was at the school. And then, joining the local gym was just too much money. You didn't have that kind of money as a kid. So, but then buying my own weights too, I had all this iron that was probably too expensive too. But anyway, I didn't really lift that much, when I think about it in high school, like you're saying, and jumped 210 my senior year in the high jump. And it was pretty good. I kept getting better every year, like you're saying. And then when I got to UCLA that first year, I went from 6'3", 180 to 6'3", 195. And it wasn't because I was lifting heavy. Well, I really didn't attack the weight room that much still.
Yeah.
And there was nobody saying, hey, you should be lifting more weights. It was just kind of like, yeah, here you are. I just put on 15 pounds, eating the dorm food and probably just developing a little bit, just
Yeah. Yeah.
added the weight. And then all of a sudden, I could not get off the ground. I mean, I just did not have enough power to overcome the 15 pounds of extra weight. And that was when I was like, I got to get my butt in the weight room, and when I got the squats, full squats up to 400 pounds, all of a sudden, after having my freshman year was terrible, did not jump anything close to what I did as a senior in high school. And then my second year, all of a sudden I shot up to like 218. And that was where I put in, all that power work. And I tell people, I go, for me, that was a big developmental thing. But I also found later that I have a lot of respect for people that do that kind of weight work all the time, because I would always go in 2-year cycles. Like that year that I lifted 400 and squatted 400 and then jumped 7.2, then the next year I didn't train that hard in the weight room. Like I found it really difficult to push that hard again, like to just, all right, here we are back to that grind. I remember walking in the weight room the first time and going, oh God, like back to that grind. I mean, some people really enjoy that, and I don't mind lifting weights recreationally, but then I don't have a set program and I don't really follow it super diligently. So, you're thinking, what's the point? But then my senior year came up, and all of a sudden I was like, hey, this is my senior year. And I got back after it. I started lifting and doing heavy hang cleans and, all the stuff that I was supposed to do. But I never could do that like back to back years because it always just seemed like such a grind. So yeah, I don't know.
It's a lot, I think, as like a speed and power athlete. So all you ever do, it's like every session you turn up to, it's like output. It's like high intensity, and
Yeah.
it drains you. I think it really does. I've never thought about it like having, because it probably wouldn't have taken you much time the following year to probably get back up to a 400-pound squat. Like if you actually tried, do you know what I mean? So like you hold that level of strength for so long,
Yeah.
that you definitely don't hold that level of speed for very long, or that level of like dynamic takeoff for very long. So you got to keep that there. But
Yeah.
it's almost like looking at it like almost like an Olympic cycle, isn't it? Like there are certain years within that cycle where you can push this, push that, but to push it all at the same time for those 4 years, the
Yeah.
likelihood that you're probably going to pick up injuries along the way.
Yes.
It's
Oh, yeah.
I,
That's the
I'm there.
burnout, physical and mental. Yeah. There's a
Yeah,
lot.
emotional burnout. That's a lot.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too. It's hard because I've had enough experience both on my own overtraining and reaping the benefits of overtraining, which is shin splints and patellar tendonitis and those things at the
Yeah.
worst possible times. Every time was like right when the season's coming to its end.
Oh
You
yeah.
be ready to jump your best, and you're walking like an old man. I go, the last thing you want to do is be
Take off.
running up to the high jump bar and dreading putting your foot on the ground. That's like that is not the way you're going to jump your best.
Yeah.
And these parents, oh, God bless them, they just don't listen. There's like, you're like, okay, you need to rest them up this week. We got a big meet coming up. And they're like, oh, I had one parent tell me, they go, yeah, well, they brought them to me on a Wednesday and they were dead, just dead, terrible workout. I'm just like, stopped it after like 30 minutes. Like I really can't watch him do anymore. I don't really want to see him do anymore because he's just in too much pain. I can tell.
Yeah.
And, said, oh yeah. And so don't do anything. The meet's on Saturday. Said he should jog, stretch, do some hip mobilities on the ground if you want, do some glute pushes if you want. He can visualize his layout. I said, I just don't want him putting his foot on the ground anymore. Okay. So we get there, and then the guy tells me the next day, he goes, yeah, we took some jumps yesterday at 6'1". And I'm like, what? We said no jumping until the meet, like what the heck are you thinking jumping him the day before the biggest meet of the year when he's already showing you that his knees are killing him?
I always say that nothing can be solved it's like you can't, it's not an exam. You can't cram for it. You can't learn everything the night before. It's the same with
Right.
you have done everything in the last 6 months. your last 3 training sessions probably mean nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
Exactly. You're not learning these last second new, killer
No.
tricks. Like we've been hammering the same principles for a long time and
Yeah.
you've picked them up, thank God. But yeah, there's not going to be
Correct.
that final one where you're like, oh yeah, if I just get this one thing and get an
Yeah.
extra 20 reps in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So, really quickly here, as I don't want to keep you too long, as I know you're a busy man. Where are you located here in Southern California? Because I want to get by there and see the work that you're doing because it's just sounds
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, likewise, I'd love to come up. So I'm in Orange County. I'm in South Orange County. So yeah, I'm in Laguna area. So
okay.
uh,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
I'm up around Garden Grove. A lot of times I do some work in Redondo because I
yeah,
live in Santa Monica and then I work in Garden Grove. So that's one is
yeah,
LA, one is Orange County, but then you're like South County. So it's like
yeah.
got a long stretch there. I've got actually some athletes that are all the way down in Murrieta. Can you believe
Oh
that?
wow,
In
wow.
San Diego, they sometimes they want to come up here. I'm like, yeah, well, you got to do what you got to do. Oh, here's my dog
Yeah,
Kirby.
yeah.
Hi, Kirby. Yes, I know. I'm doing a podcast. Go over there. Go over there. Um, sit. So excited, this dog. All right, so your South County. We'll exchange the information on the chat, but tell everybody real quick, Mike, the name of you have a business or just run under your name,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
under
So
your
it's
name and all that, so that they
so
can get to you if they need to find a guy in South County.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, you can always contact me through Instagram. So it's at McInnes Watson, which is my surname. And you can go to our website, which is it's purely for plyometric stuff, but um we've only been here since November. So like I'm
Hmm.
finding my feet with regards to getting back into track and field coaching and stuff. So um I or our business is plusplyos.com. And yeah, everything through there. You can contact us through there. You can check out our programs. You can check out our education. Yeah, and everything like that. But like through my Instagram, if you go to my bio, like there's loads of educational pieces that you can read
Right.
up. And there's everything through there. So yeah, feel free to drop me a message and
Awesome. Yeah. The what is it? You got a link tree at the bottom of your bio. Is that how it works?
yes, yeah,
I have one of
exactly.
those. Yeah. So,
Exactly.
so people can get in touch with you. And
Yeah,
like you said, you're not just doing track and field. Like you said, you're doing
yeah,
all kinds of different athletes: tennis, soccer, basketball, right? The
exactly.
whole thing.
Absolutely everything, yeah. So anything that is fast, dynamic. My love is the high jump for sure. It
Yeah.
is my absolute love, but I do enjoy team sports. And I've always had an eye for it. Like I played basketball, played soccer growing up, played rugby. So
Yeah.
I did the whole thing and I've worked with a lot of different sports now. So yeah, I'm
All
more than
right.
happy to help people that in other sports as well.
All right. Well, we're gonna start sending some people your way for sure. And I know I'm gonna end up getting down that way to see you in action and see if there's
Yeah.
anything I can steal from you. And I appreciate your time, man. Appreciate the energy. I know it's tough getting up early and especially in the summer and knocking something out before you start your busy day. So
All
um,
good. Thank you
thanks
ever
for
so much
giving
for
us your
having me on.
time.
Yeah, I appreciate
Awesome.
you having me on. It's been good to chat. Yeah, I speak too much around other sports, and I'm like, oh, get me speaking about the track world.
Right. Well, let's reserve the option of doing it again sometime soon.
Absolutely.
We
I
can talk a
appreciate
little
it.
bit more about the jumping and not so much the training that goes into it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
All
I
right.
appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. Thanks. And with that, that's going to wrap it up here on another episode of Raise the Bar. Today, we have talked plyometrics and power training with Matt McInnes Watson, the Plyo Guy. Once again, he is located in Southern Orange County, down around Laguna Beach area. Look him up on Instagram. He's got a pretty large following there. He's got his own site, obviously, plusplyos.com. Find his different links to podcasts and training programs and consultations and all the things that he's doing. Watch his posts on Instagram again, and I'm sure he's on other platforms. So just had a great time talking. Someone I look forward to meeting in person, going down and seeing the stuff that he's doing
down in South County, and also he's talked about coming in and watching some high jump training. So looking forward to that. And I want to thank Matt for his time and energy. He's a busy man. He's got me to schedule him at 8 in the morning. So he's got a lot of things to do. I'm winding down and going on vacation. So I didn't have as much to do, but I was willing to get up and talk early. So I could have been sleeping in, but that was a good time. So until next time, I'm looking forward to trying to get you some more Olympic trial high jumpers, and would be love to get Jeremy Fisher on again. Just had a great time listening to Jeremy kind of give some advice to some young high jumpers and long jumpers while I was there. And he knows his stuff, obviously, having been a high level jumper himself and coached people at the highest levels, to the podiums at the NC2A level, at the elite level, at the Olympic level. And it's fun to see him at work at his home there in Chula Vista. Lots of great athletes and things going on there. So hopefully things are going to keep picking up here in the US. Again, we're riding a huge energy wave with the Olympics coming up. Hopefully we'll get more and more interest and energy going into track and field, and with interest, maybe some more television, contracts. I think the SEC and the Big Ten are doing a great job. And we've got other corporate sponsors. Maybe that will continue to pick up and we can start getting these athletes paid and the coaches that are helping them. So it'd be great to get them on TV and get them seen, because these are amazing athletes doing, amazing things. And I'd love to see it even at the ground level. I would love to see, just like on ESPN, instead of, having some squirrel skiing, behind a boat, I would love to see young kids. I'd like to see Paralympians. I'd like to see masters level athletes competing, small meets, big meets, doesn't matter. There's always something interesting going on. So hopefully we'll get to see some of that. And that'll wrap it up here again. And we'll talk with you soon. This is Troy Haines of Sky High and Fly Jump Lab signing off. Until next time.